The chamber was silent, the only sound the soft hum of the holographic projector as the alien representative's form flickered into view. Their elongated body, covered in iridescent scales, shimmered under the artificial light. 6 eyes blinked in unison as the voice, translated into cold mechanical English, delivered the verdict. The vote is complete. Earth is to be severed from all galactic relations, trade, communication, and diplomatic interaction. You have 6 standard galactic months to withdraw all operations beyond your solar system. Commander Kira Voss, seated near the center of the assembly hall, felt her breath catch in her throat. Around her, the gathered human leaders, presidents, generals, and ambassadors, remained frozen in disbelief. For decades, they had sought entry into the Stellar Concord, a coalition of interstellar civilizations that had long dictated the rules of spacefaring species. Humanity had adapted, learned, and proven their worth. Yet now, with a single declaration, they were cast out. The alien's voice continued, unperturbed. On the grounds of cultural incompatibility and unpredictable behavioral patterns, the Stellar Concord has determined that continued contact poses a risk to galactic stability. A murmur of outrage spread through the room. Assembly Delegate Mara Solon, the highest-ranking human diplomat, stood abruptly, her face pale but composed. "This is unacceptable," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "We have adhered to all agreements, respected your laws, and contributed to interstellar efforts. You cannot simply erase us from galactic society." The alien's expression remained unreadable, their mouth parts shifting slightly as they responded. "The decision is final. Resistance will be met with force." A shiver ran through the room. The implication was clear. Humanity was not just being excluded, they were being warned. The hologram flickered again before vanishing, leaving the hall in darkness for a moment before the overhead lights adjusted. The silence was broken by a dozen voices speaking at once, some in anger, others in confusion. Some leaders clung to the hope that this was a diplomatic maneuver, a test of resolve. Others, however, understood the truth. This was not a negotiation. It was an eviction. Kira turned her head, scanning the room. She caught sight of Admiral Rourke, the head of the Terran Defense Fleet, and Director Ilara Venn of the Interstellar Research Bureau. They exchanged a glance, their expressions grim. She knew then that they had anticipated this. They had not been surprised. The realization sent a chill through her. Had they known the Assembly would reject them? Had they prepared for this moment? The implications were staggering. Humanity had built spaceports, research outposts, and trade hubs across the stars. Now, all of it would have to be abandoned. The Assembly had given them 6 months to dismantle their presence, but Kira knew that was an illusion. They were being granted a grace period, a window before enforcement became inevitable. If they did not comply, the Galactic Council's fleets would ensure they did. As the Assembly descended into chaos, Kira clenched her fists. She had spent her life working toward humanity's place among the stars, believing that diplomacy and cooperation could secure their future. Now, that future had been stripped away. But she also knew that humanity had never been one to simply accept defeat. If the Assembly wanted to erase them, they would have to reckon with the consequences of their decision. The meeting adjourned in disarray, but Kira barely noticed. She was already thinking ahead, calculating the possibilities. If they were to leave the Assembly, then they would do so on their own terms. The question was no longer whether they would comply, it was how they would respond. Commander Voss wasted no time. As soon as the Assembly adjourned, she made her way through the corridors of the Galactic Council's headquarters, her mind racing with implications. She had no doubt that the Assembly believed humanity would comply, retreating to their home system and fading into irrelevance. But she also knew that the Terran Defense Fleet and the Interstellar Research Bureau had been preparing for this moment long before the vote was cast. She found Admiral Rourke and Director Venn waiting just outside the hall, their expressions unreadable. Without a word, they turned and led her through a series of unmarked corridors, past security checkpoints that recognized their metric signatures. Finally, they reached a reinforced door embedded in the wall, where Ven pressed her palm against a hidden scanner. The door hissed open, revealing a dimly lit command center filled with officers and scientists monitoring data streams. A massive holoscreen displayed thousands of ships, colony vessels, transport freighters, and military craft scattered across the galaxy. The network of human settlements, once thought to be under Galactic Council oversight, was far more extensive than the Assembly had realized. Rourke gestured toward the display. "They think they're forcing us back to Earth," he said, his voice low. "But we've been preparing for this for years." Ven stepped forward, activating a secondary screen that showed schematics of hidden manufacturing sites. "We've been building in secret, factories orbiting dead stars, underground facilities on uninhabited moons, even stations cloaked within asteroid belts. Every colony, every outpost has been quietly expanding its capabilities. The Assembly never noticed because they never looked beyond the surface." Kira studied the data, realization dawning. "So, we're not just leaving the Assembly, we're leaving the galaxy as they know it." Rourke nodded. "We've been mapping uncharted sectors, identifying systems beyond their reach. The first ships leave in 4 months. We'll be gone before the Assembly even realizes what we're doing." Ven tapped a few commands, bringing up a list of evacuation routes. "We're not just transporting people. We're taking everything. Our technology, our research, our infrastructure. We're not surrendering our place in the stars. We're taking it with us." Kira exhaled slowly. The weight of the decision pressed upon her, but there was no hesitation in her voice when she spoke. "Then we need to move fast. If the Assembly suspects anything, they'll try to stop us." Rourke exchanged a glance with Ven. "They'll never see it coming," he said. "And by the time they do, it will be too late." Lieutenant Dax Marlowe stood at the observation deck of the EOS, one of the first colony ships to leave the solar system. Through the reinforced glass, he watched Earth shrink behind them, a blue and green sphere suspended in the void. The planet looked peaceful from here, its swirling clouds and deep oceans hiding the chaos of the evacuation below. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "It's strange, isn't it?" Dax turned to see Dr. Lyora Cade, a civilian scientist assigned to the EOS Agricultural Division. She leaned against the railing beside him, her gaze fixed on the receding world. "I spent my whole life believing we'd be here for centuries to come. And now, we're leaving it behind." Dax nodded. "I used to dream about being stationed on Mars or one of the outer colonies, but I never thought I'd be watching Earth disappear from the viewport." He exhaled, his breath fogging slightly against the cold glass. "It feels like we're abandoning it." Lyora shook her head. "No, we're giving it a chance to heal. We've been the dominant species here for too long. Maybe now, without us, nature can reclaim what was lost." Dax studied her for a moment. "You sound like you're not upset about this." A faint smile touched her lips. "I'm not. We spent decades trying to fit into the Stellar Concord, bending over backward to prove we belonged, but they never truly accepted us. They feared us. They feared us. They feared how quickly we adapt, how we innovate, and how we push beyond limits they never dared to cross. Now, we're free to build something new, something that doesn't need their approval." Dax looked back at the planet. "Still, it's hard to let go." Lyora placed a hand on his shoulder. "We're not letting go. We're moving forward, and maybe one day we'll come back. Not as petitioners, but as equals." The ship's intercom crackled to life. "All personnel, prepare for the final departure briefing. Arrival at the new Terra system is expected in 6 standard months." Dax straightened. "Guess we should head to the orientation." Lyora hesitated before following. "I wonder how many people feel like this," she mused, watching their homeworld fade into the distance, knowing they may never return. Dax didn't answer. He wasn't sure anyone truly had. As they made their way through the corridor, he glanced at the passengers around him. Families, scientists, engineers, soldiers, and diplomats. All had left behind their homes, their history, and their entire world. Some carried personal effects, others only memories. The EOS alone carried over 100,000 souls, and it was just one of thousands of ships departing Earth. The Great Departure was already underway. The evacuation had been planned in secrecy and executed with precision. The Stellar Concord had believed they were forcing humanity to retreat, but in reality, they were accelerating a plan that had been years in the making. While the Assembly debated enforcement protocols, humanity was already vanishing from their sight, slipping into the uncharted reaches of the galaxy. Dax reached the command deck, where Admiral Rourke and Director Venn were reviewing the final course adjustments. The EOAs was bound for New Terra, a distant system beyond the Assembly's mapped space. Other ships were heading even farther, some toward the outer spiral arms, others toward the galactic halo, where few species had ventured. The future no longer lay in the Assembly's grasp. It was out there, waiting for them. In a remote research outpost on the planet Zela Prime, a team of Zalari scientists gathered around a massive data console, reviewing the latest anomalies. The Zalari, a species known for their meticulous record-keeping and analytical prowess, had spent decades monitoring the human presence in galactic space. But now, their records were riddled with inconsistencies. "Commander Jorak, you need to see this," said Lyra, the lead researcher, gesturing to the holographic display. The image showed a sector map where several mining sites had been identified, sites that, according to official Stellar Concord records, should have been devoid of any human activity. Yet, the evidence was undeniable. Entire asteroids, stripped of valuable minerals, abandoned outposts with clear signs of human habitation, and energy signatures matching known Terran propulsion systems. Jorak, a stern-faced Zalari with deep-set bioluminescent eyes, leaned in for a closer look. "This can't be accurate," he muttered. The Assembly's directive was absolute. All human operations should have ceased. Where are these signals coming from? Lyra tapped a command, and the map zoomed in on a remote system deep within Council-controlled space. "This one is recent, just a week old, and here, another near the Orion Rift. We're detecting similar patterns across multiple systems. The humans are active, and they're moving fast." Jorak frowned. "But how? Their ships should have been restricted to Earth's solar system. Our patrols have confirmed no large-scale human movement." "They've developed something new," Lyra said, her voice tinged with unease. "Something that allows them to operate undetected. Our sensor arrays failed to register these sites until we deployed long-range probes." Across the chamber, another Zalari scientist, Tirek, joined the discussion. "If this is true, then the Assembly's assumption that humanity would simply comply was a mistake. They've been gathering resources, constructing facilities, and expanding their reach beyond our oversight." Jorak's antennae twitched in agitation. "Report this to the Assembly immediately. If the humans are building something in secret, we must know what it is." The message was transmitted within the hour, and soon the Stellar Concord was in turmoil. Delegates from dozens of species convened in emergency sessions, poring over the evidence. Some dismissed the findings as misinterpretations, while others feared the worst. The Assembly had believed they had contained humanity, but now, for the first time, they questioned whether they had merely driven them into the shadows. As the debate raged, a new transmission arrived, one that would shake the Council even further. A human vessel, unregistered and unmarked, had been detected entering restricted space. The humans had not only vanished from their sight, they were returning, and this time, they were not asking for permission. Commander Jalen Rowe stood at the edge of the central communication hub on New Terra, the largest of the human colony worlds. The room was dimly lit, its walls lined with pulsing data streams and holographic projections that mapped the vast diaspora of human settlements across the galaxy. Unlike the tightly controlled, bureaucratic networks of the Stellar Concord, the human colonies had developed a decentralized system that allowed for rapid adaptation and autonomous governance. Each world operated independently, yet all were interconnected through secure, quantum-encrypted channels that ensured real-time communication despite the immense distances between them. Jalen scanned the latest reports. Over 4,000 human colonies had been established in the past 5 decades, ranging from orbital habitats to subterranean cities carved into the crust of barren planets. Some were small research outposts, others bustling metropolises with populations in the millions. Unlike the Assembly's rigid territorial divisions, humanity had spread far and wide, settling in regions previously deemed uninhabitable or strategically insignificant. Their adaptability had allowed them to thrive where others had not dared to go, on the fringes of black holes, within the turbulent storms of gas giants, and even in the void between galactic arms. A soft chime signaled an incoming transmission, and Jalen turned toward the central display. The face of Governor Tessa Virick appeared, her expression grim. "Commander Rowe, we've just received confirmation from the Oran cluster. Their third settlement is fully operational, and population growth is exceeding projections. They've also begun preliminary excavations of an abandoned alien structure, one that predates any known Council civilization." Jalen's eyes narrowed. "An unknown civilization? Are they certain?" Virick nodded. "Their preliminary scans suggest advanced metallurgy and energy signatures unlike anything we've encountered before. And there's more. Some of the inscriptions match ancient Earth languages, suggesting a connection we've never seen." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had always believed their spacefaring ambitions were relatively new, their first contact with the Stellar Concord marking the beginning of their interstellar history. But if these ruins predated the Assembly's oldest known species, then it meant something far more profound. Humans might not have been newcomers to the galactic stage. Jalen turned to the assistant seated at the adjacent console. "Coordinate with all colonies. If there are more ruins, we need to find them before the Assembly does." Across the chamber, officers began relaying orders, sending out directives to human settlements on distant worlds. The diaspora was no longer just about survival. It was about discovery. If humanity had been here before, if they had left traces that had been buried beneath time and forgotten, then their exile might have been more than a punishment. It might have been a return. Governor Virick's voice cut through the quiet hum of the room. "If these findings are confirmed, it changes everything. The Assembly dismissed us as chaotic and untrustworthy. But what if they were wrong? What if we were never the outsiders?" Jalen exhaled slowly. "Then we've spent the last century building a new future, unaware that we might have been reclaiming an ancient one." The thought sent a shiver down his spine. The Assembly had seen humanity as a problem to be contained. But now, with each new discovery, it became clear that they had been preparing for something far greater, and the Assembly had no idea what they had set in motion. The diaspora's expansion was not just a matter of survival. It was a calculated effort to build a self-sustaining network beyond the Assembly's reach. While the Council believed they had banished humanity to Earth, the truth was far more complex. The human colonies had not only grown in number, but had also developed an infrastructure that allowed them to thrive independently, free from the bureaucratic constraints that had once slowed their progress. At the heart of this expansion was the Gateway Network, a system of quantum-entangled transit rings that enabled instantaneous travel across vast distances. Unlike the Assembly's hyperspace lanes, which required ships to navigate through established routes and were vulnerable to interference, the human gateways operated on a decentralized model. Each colony maintained its own ring, linked to a central hub on New Terra, allowing for seamless communication and resource distribution. The gateways had been constructed in secret, hidden within asteroid fields, deep in planetary crusts, and even aboard mobile stations that could be relocated if necessary. The Assembly had dismissed human technology as inferior, but in reality humanity had quietly surpassed them, developing systems that were faster, more efficient, and entirely independent. Beyond transportation, the colonies had established vast industrial complexes, mining operations, and research facilities in regions the Assembly had never explored. The outer spiral arms, the galactic halo, and even the uncharted voids between galaxies became sites of human innovation. Automated mining drones extracted rare elements from rogue planets, while orbital shipyards constructed fleets that could rival any in the Assembly's navy. Unlike the rigid, hierarchical structures of the Council's member species, human settlements operated with a degree of autonomy that allowed for rapid adaptation. Each colony functioned as a node in a vast interconnected web, capable of sustaining itself while contributing to the greater whole. This hidden infrastructure was not just a means of survival, it was a declaration of independence. The Assembly had believed they could control humanity through isolation, but they had underestimated the species' ability to build and adapt. Where the Council had relied on established trade routes and political alliances, humanity had forged its own path, unrestricted by the Assembly's outdated protocols. The result was a network that spanned the galaxy, growing stronger with each passing year. The Assembly, still reeling from the realization that humanity had not only survived, but thrived, remained blind to the full extent of what had been built. Their patrols, designed to enforce the banishment, failed to detect the hidden colonies. Their sensors, calibrated to known technology, could not recognize the new human-developed systems. And most importantly, they had never anticipated that humanity would not only leave, but do so in a way that ensured they would never need to return. As the years passed, the Assembly's confusion turned into concern. Reports of human activity in restricted zones became more frequent. Entire asteroids were found stripped of valuable resources, yet no ships had been detected. Abandoned outposts, once thought to be beyond human reach, now bore signs of habitation. The Assembly's investigators, baffled by the scale of humanity's operations, began to suspect that something far more advanced was at play. But by the time the Assembly realized the truth, it was already too late. Humanity had not just vanished from their sight. They had built something new, something vast, and something that no longer required their approval. The Stellar Concord had spent decades maintaining a delicate balance of power among its member species, but all of it was about to be undone. The reports had started as isolated anomalies, entire worlds found abandoned, their cities eerily intact, their populations vanished without a trace. At first, the Assembly dismissed them as internal conflicts or natural disasters, but as more systems fell silent, a pattern emerged. Something was moving through the galaxy, consuming entire civilizations with an efficiency no known species had ever demonstrated. The first confirmed encounter came from the Virex system, where a Threxian research outpost had been monitoring deep space anomalies. A single message, barely decipherable before transmission ceased, described an approaching fleet of crystalline vessels, their structures shifting as though alive. The Threxian fleet was mobilized, their warships equipped with the most advanced weaponry the Assembly had to offer. But when they engaged the unknown force, their weapons barely registered, their sensors unable to lock onto the crystalline ships. Within minutes, the Threxian vessels were reduced to drifting husks, their crews never heard from again. Panic spread through the Assembly as more worlds were lost. The Zarvaxis, known for their brutal efficiency in warfare, deployed their entire battle fleet to the Lyra Expanse, where a similar attack had been reported. Their forces, among the most powerful in the Assembly, were confident they could repel the intruders. The battle lasted less than an hour. The crystalline entities moved without hesitation, their ships absorbing energy-based attacks and retaliating with pulses of raw entropy that disintegrated matter at the molecular level. The Zarvaxis fleet was annihilated, and the Assembly lost contact with the Lyra Expanse entirely. The Assembly's leadership convened an emergency session, their once unshakable confidence eroding. The crystalline entities had no known origin, no diplomatic presence, and no communication. They simply appeared, consumed, and moved on. Some delegates speculated they were a natural phenomenon, a cosmic force beyond comprehension. Others feared they were the result of an experiment gone wrong, a weapon unleashed by a species too reckless to control it. But all agreed on one thing: if they did not find a way to stop them, the Assembly would fall. Commander Jalen Rowe watched the Council's frantic deliberations from a secure observation deck aboard the EOS. The Assembly's desperation was palpable. Their fleets, once considered the pinnacle of galactic defense, were being wiped out with terrifying ease. Their leaders, who had once dismissed humanity as an unpredictable anomaly, now faced a true existential threat, one they were utterly unprepared for. Ro turned to Governor Tessa Virick, who stood beside him, arms crossed. "They're finally realizing how fragile their control was," she said. "For all their power, they never anticipated something beyond their understanding." Ro nodded. "And now they're looking for a way to survive." A signal interrupted their conversation. A direct transmission from the Assembly's Emergency Council. The Assembly leader, a towering insectoid diplomat, appeared on the screen, his mandibles twitching in distress. "Humanity," he said, his voice strained. "We know you are watching. We need your help." Ro exchanged a glance with Virick before responding. "You spent 50 years trying to erase us from the stars. Now you're asking for our intervention." The Assembly leader hesitated, his entire species' survival hanging in the balance. "We made a mistake," he admitted. "We thought we were containing a problem. We were wrong." Ro leaned forward. "Then tell us the truth. Do you want to survive, or do you want to control us again?" The insectoid diplomat's antennae drooped. "We want to live." Ro exhaled slowly. "Then you'll listen to what we have to say." Captain Sarah Voss stood on the bridge of the Reconciliation, watching as Earth grew larger in the viewport. A century had passed since humanity had been banished from the Stellar Concord, but now they were returning, not as exiles, but as something far greater. The planet below was different from the one they had left. Without human industry to pollute its skies or disrupt its ecosystems, Earth had healed. Forests had reclaimed cities, rivers ran clear again, and the scars of human expansion had faded beneath nature's patient restoration. The Reconciliation was not alone. Dozens of human vessels, sleek and advanced beyond anything the Assembly had ever seen, formed a protective formation around the ship. Behind them, an armada of diaspora ships, representing the vast network of human settlements, stretched into the void. Alongside them, vessels from other species, some former council members, others independent civilizations that had joined the diaspora, waited for the moment that would change the galaxy forever. A voice crackled over the comms. "Captain Voss, we're receiving confirmation from the Assembly delegation. They're ready for the ceremony." Sarah exhaled slowly. "Understood. Begin descent." As the ship broke through Earth's atmosphere, she saw the gathering below. The old United Nations headquarters in Geneva had been carefully restored, its once cracked walls now reinforced, its glass dome repaired. But the most striking sight was the monument that had been erected in the center of the grounds. A towering obelisk of polished stone bore a simple inscription, one that had become the unofficial motto of the diaspora. "We forged our path without chains." She stepped onto the landing platform where a delegation of former council leaders awaited. At the center stood Elder Jorak, the same Zalari scientist who had once studied humanity's mysterious disappearance. Now, he was one of the few remaining voices of reason in the Assembly. Beside him, Admiral Peter Cade, the current commander of the United Terran Armada, stood with dignified calm. The two groups, those who had once banished humanity and those who had built a new future without them, faced each other across the ceremonial space. Jorak stepped forward. "We stand here to acknowledge the past," he said, his voice carrying across the quiet assembly. "A past where we underestimated you, where we feared your potential and tried to contain it, but we were wrong." Cade met his gaze. "We don't seek vengeance. We seek a future where no species is held back by the fear of others." Sarah looked at the dignitaries around her. The galaxy had changed. The Assembly had been forced to dissolve its rigid hierarchy, replaced by a new council that allowed all species equal representation. The Gateway Network, once humanity's greatest secret, now connected not just human worlds but also those who had chosen to join them. The diaspora had become a new galactic order, not one built on dominance, but on mutual respect, and shared progress. As the final signatures were placed on the Galactic Concordat, Sira turned her gaze to the horizon. Earth, once abandoned, was now a place of unity. And for the first time in 100 years, humanity had returned. Not as petitioners, but as architects of a new era.